Thank you, Your Holiness, for all these images of the servant and those whom he serves. And we're very thankful to see them present with us in the service of Your Holiness in the diocese here and in all the dioceses. Yani, I can't imagine all the services and all the possibilities of where Your Holiness could be serving. And the fact that I think us as bishops and priests and servants and people to see Your Holiness making time for us in a diocese, it shows that there's obviously a lot more to the service of Your Holiness that we don't know about, and we see that present with us. With Your Holiness's permission, we can start the questions and answers.
Yes.
Mr. Ayed Barsoum.
Mute me, please. Hello.
First question here. Thank you, Your Holiness, for your time. I have a question about when we were young, it was easy for us to believe everything that was told to us. But now, when we say anything to our children, like for example, come to church and we're gonna take the body and blood of Christ, they say no, it's just bread and grape juice. So how can we handle this? Of course, this is normal because he cannot understand everything. But by having conversation with them and repeating the facts and representing it simply, little by little, it will get better. Like, for example, when we were younger, they used to tell us when going to communion, come and get this juice. But step by step, we understood what it is, just like baptism, for example. We all got baptized when we were babies and we didn't understand anything. But what's important is to form a habit. How to plant in them that there is time dedicated for God, and this is very important. There is time for the one who created me. This time could be the weekend or going to Sunday school, for example, or according to everyone's situation. But what's really important is to have time, is to allocate time. God gives us all our life, so He gives us the 24 hours a day, and I tell Him, so here it is the time I'm going to give you. Whatever that time it is, a couple of hours a day, this is the sign of me thanking God for the life that He gives me. Thank you, Ayed. Next question is by Mr. Gergis Gad. Thanks to Your Holiness for being with us yesterday and today. And my question is if Your Holiness can give us some guidance on how to discipline the kids and what's the difference between discipline and control.
والفرق ما بين التهذيب والكنترول.
Thank you, Gergis. So, of course, discipline is something that's really important, but I want to give you an example. So, you know, when we teach our kids etiquette, for example, it's not appropriate if I'm sitting among people who are coming to visit me and look at the clock or my watch. That's etiquette. The little things that we teach them to have this discipline, like for example, standing up to pray, how to stand in midnight praises or in the liturgy, or when we go to a retreat or convention, how should we act? We don't do anything inappropriate. Even if we have time to play with each other, to have a good time, have fun, but at the same time do it within limits of not doing anything inappropriate. So discipline is a lot of little principles that we teach the kids. Another example is when we all sit down to eat, it's not appropriate to start eating before we pray or before everybody is sitting down on the table. These are the things that give us a good picture of how life should be together with our God and with our Christ inside the church. some of it is social and some of it is spiritual, but at the end we're trying to build like the whole being of the person. But be extra careful not to use any kind of violence or any form of punishment. He's coming to Christ, who is always cheerful and accepting. So if the servant is not able to be cheerful, he cannot actually be a servant. He has to always be cheerful and always have a welcoming spirit. So he would be able to receive the kids and welcome them and longing to see them. And this is what builds the relationship between the servant and the kids that he's serving. Without any form of violence, even if sometimes the kids themselves have some like sort of violence in their behavior. But you as a servant always have this patience and long suffering.
Abuna Titus.
So next question is why are women and girls not able to take communion in the times when they have the monthly period?
Thank you, but I need the translation, please.
Sorry, William, I can't hear what you're saying. There's a distortion in the sound. Can you say it louder?
على ما أعتقد يا سيدنا هي بتسأل على البنات والتناول في أوقات زي الدورة الشهرية وكده، يعني ليه ما بيقدرش يتناولوا في الأيام دي؟
من فضلك يا أنبا يوسف عيد الإجابة، عيد السؤال لو سمحت.
هي بتسأل أحيانا البنات بيسألوها كخادمة على فترة التناول أثناء ما بيكون عندهم البيريود، فليه ما بيقدروش يتناولوا؟ يعني نرد على البنات ونقول لهم إيه في الفترة دي؟
شيء مهم جدا إن إحنا
So it is very important to be fully prepared to approach communion. We are always ready or should be ready in any occasion, whether it's spiritual or social, before we attend. For example, I can't go to a social event with like clothes that's not appropriate. Like for example, my jacket is ripped, or even my hairstyle is not done right. This is even from the social point of view, but when we talk about spiritual preparation, if we are approaching communion or the sacraments, we have to do that very respectfully. So the church has liturgies every day of the month, and sometimes more than one liturgy a day. But during that time of the monthly period for the girls, they are not fully prepared during that time to come and take communion. So we are trying to present our lives to God in the best form possible. During that time, the girl may be like down, or maybe has a little bit of a fever. She may also be tired or has little energy. So the rest of the days of the month are always available to come and take communion. And in general, if we take communion once a week, that's 4 times a month, that's very good. So this is all about preparing ourselves for the sacrament. But of course, we're looking at the girl that she is pure and clean. And what's happening at that time of the month is something that's physiological, something that God created, and He created it for a reason. But never looked upon as something that's evil or something that's defiled. And something like that is not even mentioned.
Miranda Henry.
Yes, I'm ready. مساء الخير يا سيدنا.
Next question. First, I would like to express how nice it was to see Your Holiness yesterday and today, and this had like a big effect on everybody that was attending. And since we all want to grow spiritually, I feel that this interaction with the priests, the bishops, and Your Holiness, who is our Father, I feel that this interaction is very helpful to help us grow spiritually. So yesterday, right after the meeting, I sent to His Grace Bishop Youssef and asked him if we can have this opportunity to meet with Your Holiness, all the congregation, and if anyone has any questions to ask Your Holiness. And these questions could be about anything, could be about the service, our spiritual life, could be about family questions. And His Grace answered me right away and said, this is a good suggestion and we'll try to do it. I felt after you spoke today about the role of the servant that we look up to our priests and bishops for this role, and Your Holiness, of course. So my suggestion is that we try to repeat these meetings like anytime Your Holiness have time to do it. And just like today, we have a lot of people attending, we have a lot of priests attending, so this has a very big impact on everybody. It makes us feel that the priest and the bishop are fathers who are actually listening to their children and listening to their problems. Just like when the father is always present at home, it gives the kids confidence that they can change, they can take him as a role model. Also, if the priest or the bishop or the pope we meet with them frequently, maybe every 4 to 6 months or so, this would have a very big impact on how all the congregation would feel. Just like Your Holiness mentioned about the relationship between the servant and people they are serving, that it's like a shepherd with the sheep. So I feel if we can make this happen, this would benefit a lot of people on different levels.
زي الراعي بالرعية فأنا نفسي حاجة زي كده تتنفذ على كل المستويات الداخلية والخارجية وحاسة إن هي هتكون مفيدة جدا على المستوى الروحي والاجتماعي والأسري وهتفيد قوي الشعب في الحياة الروحية. شكرا يا قداسة البابا.
شكرا يا ميراندا.
Thank you, Miranda. I feel this is a good suggestion, and I know that Bishop Youssef and the bishops and the priests, you have like an active diocese, and you have a lot of services. Of course, this is a very good idea to make this meeting happen. Although this time in Egypt is late at night, but I still feel it's important, and we're actually thankful that because of the COVID, we are able to do these Zoom meetings now. So there is no problem with doing these meetings. The only problem that we usually have is the time. We also use Zoom here in Egypt to do meetings sometimes with the bishops, sometimes with the priests, or in Cairo. We also have meetings with the Gulf countries, and we are trying. So may God give us time to make all these meetings happen. But again, it's a good idea, and I hope it would happen at different levels. Thank you. Hello, Your Holiness. My name is Alexa, and I just wanted to tell you happy birthday. And I wanted to tell you that my grandfather is Buna Mikhail Aziz. So His Holiness was laughing.
شكرا
Thank you,
يا
Mayan, and thank you,
مريان.
Alexa, so much.
شكرا مريان.
I'm very happy to hear your voice and to see you as well.
أليكسا أليكسا شكرا يا أليكسا و thank you so much for you. أنا مبسوط خالص إن أنا أسمع صوتك وأشوفك كمان. Thank you يا حبيبي. Thank you.
سيدنا أنا كنت عايزة أقولك happy birthday من أول الشهر و جدي هو أبونا ميخائيل.
جدي أبونا ميخائيل عزيز مش كده؟ وأنبا يوسف يقرب لك؟
هو خالي.
خالك يا بختك. يا بختك. ثانك يو. ربنا معاكم دايما.
Thank you.
متشكر. باي باي. باي باي.
رانا ميخائيل.
Next question by Rana Mikhail. Thank you for this meeting. I just had a quick question about change in the service. Your Holiness mentioned that something about change in the service, but a lot of people are always afraid to change anything in the service. And they feel that the same way they grew up in the service and whatever they had like about 30 years ago, they want to keep the same thing. And according to them, what they received, they want to keep going in the church. Of course, some things are out of the question, like dogmas and things that have to do with our faith. But when it comes to service, can Your Holiness give us some examples of what we can actually change in the service, so that we would take these things as guidelines, and at the same time, the people who are scared to change anything would be more comfortable that this is coming from the Pope or the Bishop, and we can just have it in some points, like for example, when we sing in the church spiritual songs, like what's allowed, what are the musical instruments that we can use, because we go into a lot of debates, like for example, whether the girls should cover their hair while they're in choir in New Year's Eve, for example. So these things, although they are very little, but they cause a lot of argument sometimes. So can Your Holiness give us some guidelines of what we can actually change, and maybe these things could actually be added to the website of the diocese, so it would be like a reference for us. We can use in whether we're going on a trip, Sunday school, any kind of service. So this would again comfort the people who don't want to change or feel bad about changing. First, thank you. I want to tell you that this is a very good question. Of course, it's impossible to make a list of what we can do and what we can do. Also, the culture is different in different places. Like, for example, something may not be appropriate here in Egypt, but the same exact thing would be totally normal in a Western society, for example. So we cannot really have a list of do's and don'ts, but in general, the process of change for us as Egyptians is very hard, because all of us grew up in the same place around the Nile, and we all occupy like 7% of the area of Egypt. We had the same circumstances, and all of us, if I can say this, we have the genes of no change. Like we resist change. That's why they say that the Eastern person, the Oriental person, is like a tree. He is born, lives, and dies in the same place. But a Western person is like a bird. He's born somewhere, grows up in another, lives in another, travels to another, and then dies in a fifth place.
عملية مختلفة ما بين الشرق والغرب.
So here between the East and the West, it's a different
تحدي كبير
process.
عندكم.
And I know this is a very big challenge for you in the West, because our church grew in an Oriental atmosphere.
الجو الغربي
And then
خالص.
you guys came to the West with a different culture. So as long as we are not touching the faith or our dogmas, anything would be
كل حاجة قابلة للتعديل
open for
والتغيير.
change.
حاجات كتيرة خالص. يعني مثلا
Like for example, back in the days we used to use خلاجي for the liturgy. Now instead of putting that خلاجي book on the altar, we actually can put an iPad or a laptop.
مثلا في بلد من البلاد
This is, for example, a change. I was once in a Western country, and I asked some people, they are not Coptic, how do you perform your baptism ritual? And they said we just take some water and sprinkle it on the head of the person who is to be baptized. So I told them in our church we actually immerse the person in the water, and they said we used to have that before, but because it's very cold here, the water would sometimes freeze, and sometimes it would freeze on the kid that's being baptized. So I asked them, can you warm the water up like we do? And they said no, because Jesus was baptized in like natural water in the Jordan River.
حتى الإشارة دي
So this like process is according to what works. We see what works with our kids and our culture, and we do it. For example, regarding the head cover for the girls. So this is a very nice sign of submission. When a girl puts a head cover, even if it's in a choir, it's a nice sign of saying, I am a daughter of Christ and I submit to him, as if Christ is putting his hand on me. So this in itself is a good teaching, and so on. But we cannot come up with certain rules and say you have to do this and don't do that. So you together, you can sit together, the bishop and the priest and the servant, and see what's appropriate to do, what needs to be done, and do it as long as it doesn't touch our dogmas and rights and things like that. Next question by Father Benjamin. If Your Holiness can, I'm not sure if this is something that you have seen in other places, but I feel here in our country that I feel that the men and youth, like the male youth, I feel they are not engaged in very much in the spiritual life, and I feel that the women and girls are more fervent, and also in taking care of their families and being active in the service. Of course, some are, and they're doing a fantastic job, but it's a very small percentage. So I see youth now, male youth, that are not really they don't know how to serve their family, how to serve their wives, how to establish a relationship, intimate relationship with God. So I don't know if Your Holiness had the same experience in other places. We are actually trying to start some services regarding to target this group, but if Your Holiness can give us any guidelines or experience about this. Thank you, Father Benjamin. Yes, we actually see the same thing here in Egypt, that women in general have more of a relationship, they are present more in the church and the service, and even in the theological schools, we see more admissions to women. And of course, this is not something bad, because that woman will be one day a mom, and she will raise boys and girls. But I feel that this phenomenon that Your Reverence is talking about is because men have not had or were not served enough, both in the church and at home. And to fix this, we have to increase the service to this group. Like, for example, recently there are meetings just for men and other meetings just for the male youth. Just like we had and we still do meetings for the family, meetings for the women, and meeting for the girls, for example. But the men and boys, they need more personal service and attention, and this brings a lot of fruit. Because what happens is, because of like the girls being attending more, have good voices in the choir or so on, they get more attention than the boys in general. And of course, this is not good. So maybe you can have a plan for the new year to reach out to all the boys and all the men in the church, and try to compensate for any lack in the service of those people. At the same time, any service for the women and the girls is very important, because these are the ones who will become mothers, and they are the ones who will raise boys and girls when they grow up. And they are the ones who will teach them and raise them up how to be responsible and how to respect the family, and what it means to have a family and to be responsible for it. Also, they will teach them how to love their wives, and how to keep the house full of love, and raise children the right way. These values is what we actually are. This is our responsibility to keep going. This is a comment by His Grace Bishop Youssef. With your prayers, Your Holiness, Father Benjamin, the one who asked the question, is actually planning a new service for the men, and we're planning to have in 2021 a big meeting for all the men in the diocese to explain how does God look at the man, and what's his purpose for him. Also, like Your Holiness mentioned, we started having some meetings that target men. Like, for example, in the city of Nashville, we have a successful meeting that is only for men. So the point that Your Holiness mentioned, we felt that we have a need for these services, and we are starting to plan for meetings to address this issue. His Holiness is saying that in Egypt also we have the same need, and we started having special meetings targeting men, and especially in the areas that are highly populated, and some of these meetings are even specialized. So these are targeting like special groups of men, not just all men. Like, for example, around a year ago, I attended a meeting, and they told me this meeting is for the barbers. So this is actually going on in the city of Alexandria. It's a meeting that they do every Monday for the barbers that are only the men. They separated the women who actually work in the same profession, and it's a very successful meeting, and they have some activities for them, and they like take all the measures that Your Grace talked about. Next question: I heard there was something going on in Alexandria about someone talking or doing some teaching that was questionable. So I wanted to know what Your Holiness' opinion is about this, and who is the one that's supposed to answer or address these questions? Is it the bishop, the priest, the servant? Thank you for the question. So I first want to say that the priest that we're talking about in Alexandria is very respectful, and he has a successful service. He had a lecture last June, and he was talking in it, and while he was talking, he like maybe like didn't say certain things about the scientific or the science and the Bible in the way he wanted to say. So no more or less. This lecture was about an hour. The person who clipped a part of it and made a big deal out of it, this was done maliciously, and he only took like a part and didn't take the rest of the lecture. So the secretary of the synod, they spoke with that priest, and they know him very well, and he apologized, and he said that this was a misexpression of what he wanted to say, and it was over. So this is the whole story, not more and not less. But when we say that someone is having a wrong teaching, that means that he has been teaching for many years, and teaching something wrong. In this case, that wasn't the case at all. He was this one is different, and but some people like to exaggerate things, so be careful of what you watch on social media. Next question by Rasha Lua. Hello, Your Holiness. I am from the Church of St. Mary and Archangel Michael, Florida, and I have a question about special need kids. I'm a mom of a kid that's special needs. He's not a kid anymore, but I feel like the same way it was back in Egypt that we didn't have service for those kids. Also here we still don't have it. We have service for Sunday school kids of all ages, but not for special needs. I was very happy when Your Holiness came to visit us a couple of years ago in Saint Rebecca Church here, and you made time to come in and greet those special need kids in specific. I feel that they need to know about Jesus. They are very simple, and they just need people to talk to them in a very simple way about God, because they only hear about God from us at home, but they also need to go to church and hear about God in the church as well. So for example, recently we had someone in our church that passed away, and she was a single mom of one of her kids is special needs, and now we don't know what to do with him. So we had an idea, but we need Your Holiness support and His Grace Bishop Youssef's support as well, that we need something for our kids after we pass, because we need to make sure that they are going to be treated well, they're not going to be abused, and also we need them to be served even while we're still alive, to have a Sunday school class for them to go to. So I feel that they need to learn about God from a good servant, not only if that servant is present at church, but even if he is not, they also need to have a class for them and learn about God. So of course this is very important to me, and I wanted to know Your Holiness opinion about it. Thank you, Rasha. Of course this service is very important and necessary, but like you mentioned, the problem in this service is always the presence of that servant, the servant who can understand the needs of these. Some churches actually have this service, not a lot of churches, but some do have it. Some churches even started having like a house for special need kids. They start by inviting them for like a day use, and then after that they can have a room in that house. For example, one church in Alexandria have a service now for the female special need kids. Again, this is a necessary service, and the problem, like we mentioned, is the lack of servants that can handle this service. But I feel that it's growing more and more, and people recognize the importance of it now. It would be great if some dioceses can plan to have this service, but it always depends on the servant that can deal with the special need kids and understand their needs. May God send more servants that can deal with the special need kids and understand and know how to deal with them. I actually hope that this service would grow, but I do see that it's now acknowledged in some places and some churches more than before, growing step by step. But may God send them the servant. This is a comment by His Grace Bishop Youssef that we do have an annual convention for the special needs every year in the month of July, and it's very successful. The only year it didn't take place was last year because of COVID. Also, to have a house for the special need kids is actually something that we are planning, and Father Joaquin from Florida is leading this effort. We also have a curriculum for the special. So this curriculum is different from the regular Sunday school curriculum, and it's simplified for special needs, and it's available on the diocese website. When we have a bigger group of special need kids, we actually have, like in one of the cities, we have a liturgy for them. So we bring them all to the liturgy, and it's just for them. But sometimes we run through the problem of, like for example, in one church we may have one or two kids. So we ask, should we just open a class for the one or two kids, or should we just have them attend with the regular Sunday school class? The other challenge in this service is, like Your Holiness mentioned, the availability of a servant who is trained and knows how to deal with special need kids, because not everybody can do this. So for example, in St. Mary Oviedo, the church where Russia belongs to, it was the first church to have a class for autistic kids, because there was a servant in the church that was trained in this field. Also last year we started a service which is the Lost Sheep, to train servants how to deal with special needs groups. But like Your Holiness mentioned, there is not enough servants, and with the praise of Your Holiness, when we hopefully we're going to have more. I agree with Russia that this is a very important and necessary service, and that we need to secure their future under the supervision of the church. His Holiness is also saying that one of the churches, they were able to buy 2 apartments and dedicate these apartments for the service of the special need girls. So even after their families are not there, they can still have a place to live. This is a service that's going on now, and there is an excellent care for these girls, and they also are using some volunteers. For example, a servant, a female servant, would come and volunteer to stay with them for about maybe 4 hours a day. So this is a very successful service that's in the town of Smuha in Alexandria. May God bless. Peace, Your Holiness. This is a question by Samir Mikhail. So Your Holiness mentioned that a servant should stay serving all his life, but right now I'm retired, and I feel that the gap, difference in age between me and people I'm serving is very big, and I don't have much influence on them. So what's a suggestion for a service that someone can do in this age. Thank you, Samir. Of course, there are so many different services. So, for example, in older age, the service could take a form of like serving in a place where the people are having medical help, in visiting some sick people. It doesn't have to be some sort of teaching, or it doesn't have to be serving younger kids, because yes, the gap is going to be big. But I want to mention something important, that the age is not only like the age that we write in a document, but there is the mental age, there is the emotional age, or the age where I interacted with people. So, for example, someone may be of old age, but he can interact with younger age in a very good way, and this is very good. Of course, this is not always the case, but sometimes it's there. But again, there are so many different services, like, for example, even administrative services in the churches may work in an older age. Some services that involve teaching, that involve family ministry, or helping the newcomers. So the field of service is very big and diverse, and I'm sure that you will find something that's up. Next question by Effet Wilson. I just had a question, Your Holiness, about negative and positive energies. I get some questions now from younger generation about, like, for example, they ask me, do you hear the water? Do you see the air? And then I tell them that God created the water and the air, but they don't have to be something living. But they say, but He created us from these elements, so how are they not living? So these ideas they got from yoga, that they teach them how to be mindful of everything around them, of the water, of the air, and they give them exercises to be how to be again mindful of everything inside their body and out, and how to relax and focus more. But the way they teach these things to them, sometimes they take it a little far, so I feel when they talk to me that we are kind of like maybe going back to worshiping the sun and the fire. I tried arguing with a couple of them, but I wasn't successful, so I don't really know what to do. So it's all in saying, thanks God we don't have these things here in Egypt, though we have air and water, but they don't talk yet. So I want to tell you, let's of course these things are based on some scientific facts. We can take the good out of it, and if it's helping with concentration or things like that, we can also benefit from that. But it doesn't have to be the whole life, and it does not mean at the same time to reject the spiritual fact. Also, it would help if the people dealing with our kids regarding these issues would be at a level of education that would give them a chance to have a conversation with them. For example, sports or exercise. It's important to have that every day. It's beneficial for us. Some psychological exercises are also beneficial. So there is no problem with using science if there is a benefit. But of course, if it's going to replace the worship of God, of course, that's not acceptable.
مرفوضة تماما خالص. شكرا يا إيفت.
Titus.
My name is George from Nashville. I have a question concerning the servants that are serving now, whether in Nashville or Tennessee or the Diocese or wherever. How do we fight the war against social media? And how do we, interpret to the youth who will later on be servants? And how do we explain to them that, the LGBTQ community, because that's how they're getting that message from social media. So how do we, teach them that not everything is always got a good message to it or a right message to it? So how do we help them understand the truth behind our church and our message? And how do we explain to them to find the right message and everything.
I need translation.
يقول سيدنا محمد.
So next question, you probably listened to it in English, but I'm gonna repeat what His Grace Bishop Youssef said in his translation. So the question is about how to address the challenge of social media now and its influence on the youth. Like sometimes they hear things on social media regarding, like for example, homosexuality or things like that, and the effect on them from social media is most of the time bigger than the effect of the 1 hour they spend at church every week. So how can we address? Of course, social media is a big problem now, and it affects very much how our youth think about many things, and I feel bad for them, honestly. So the problem is because of the many times they hear something like repeating over and over, for example, about homosexuality or same-sex marriage, or when they keep hearing this over and over, it becomes something normal. So our reference is always the Bible. So the Bible is what guides our thoughts and our behavior as well, general behavior and anything that has to do with moral. Also, the Bible is the foundation and the base on which we build everything. That's why it's important when talking about these things to refer to the Bible. Mention what the Bible says in its history, in everything it says about a certain issue. Also, these things happen at different times as if it's like a fashion. For example, something that we talk about a lot today, we may have not been talking about like 10 years ago. So the trend now is not the trend many years ago, is not going to be the trend in many years to come. Even human being himself, humanity passed by different eras, different stages in their worship. So they started worshiping elements of nature, and then worshiping idols, and then worshiping different kinds of gods. They came to the worship of the one God, and then they started worshiping their minds. Then they worshiped what they were able to invent, and then nowadays people worship their mood or like their desires, and that's why they get astray very quickly. And that's because they deviated from the foundation on which God built our lives here on earth. So be clear about mentioning facts from the Bible, about mentioning the teaching of the Bible regarding any issue when you talk to the youth, and tell them and repeat what the Bible says. And the Bible is older than any of these inventions. Also, the Bible was written through the inspiration of God, and this gives us, of course, the confidence that God is the one who created us. He's the one who knows what the best life is. Everything that happens around us is controlled by God. Even, for example, the leaf that falls from the tree. Even like the Bible says, our hairs are counted by God, and so everything is accounted for by God. Notice also that man is the one who, by his invention, sometimes destroys things in nature. But we say that the facts about humanity, the facts about this world and nature is always going to be in the Bible. So it's important to mention these facts to the people, to focus on it, and to highlight. Peace, Your Holiness. We are learning from you how to be a role model to the servants, but I have a question that I see in myself and in the servants as well.
اهتم بانك تظهرها وتبينها وتعمل فوكس عليها. شكرا.
Justina Nagy.
سلام يا سيدنا، مقبل الآية دي.
اهلا بيك.
احنا بنشكر قداستك على اللقاء دون، واحنا بنتعلم منك نكون قدوة ازاي لكل المخدومين بتوعنا. بس انا يا سيدنا ليا سؤال، انه احنا يعني بشوفه
I
فيا
feel that we as servants, because of the you know how busy we are in life and all the things we do. Like when we go to the Sunday school, for example, and there is a kid that's misbehaving, sometimes we feel that there is a kid that's misbehaving. Sometimes we don't want him to be there, and that's why I think this may be one of the causes of, like it was mentioned, that there are more girls now that are interested in the church than boys. So we have a tendency now to be attracted to the kids that are well behaved, the ones that are coming to listen to the lesson, the ones that are coming to learn the hymns and they focus. But the ones that don't, although nowadays it's common for the kids like to make fun of the hymns or to misbehave, but I feel that we don't have this mentality that our servants had before, that the church is a hospital and everyone is coming, he needs some kind of treatment. So like I feel that we're not looking out for the kids, the ones that need the most help. Like for example, if a kid goes out of the church and he's dressed up as a deacon, I don't see anyone going after him to see what he's doing or where he's going. So it ends up that the ones where their father, for example, is with them and like they are serving together, they are the ones who get to serve, but the other ones don't. So we ourselves need to be a role model. Like we take care of our own kids, we need to take care of all the other kids as well. So yes, Justina, you're right, and this requires a servant that has a sense of responsibility. I like very much when a father is taking care of his kids and noticing their behavior, and the mom, or of course both of them. Because if we are not going to take care of our kids, who are we going to take care of? So taking care of our own kids, of course, with the limited number, 3 or 4, that's very good. But also taking care of the other kids, the general sense of responsibility is very important, and we need to plan this in our servants. Also, if there is like overactivity by the kids, especially the boys, it's good for the servants who are serving them to maybe get together and talk about this situation and talk about how to deal with this activity. Because to be active is a good thing, but they should discuss how to make use of this in a good way. So it's very important to have a sense of responsibility in general towards all the kids. And like we mentioned in the lecture, that if we can have this bond between the servant and his kids, or the servant and her kids, like if every maybe 6 to 10 kids in the church are followed up upon by a servant who is taking care of them, we would have like very good, bring up very good generations in the future.
Ashraf Labib.
Next question by Ashraf Labib. I'm glad Your Holiness is with us today. I would like to ask about, I had like something that was causing me some pain in recently, is that since COVID started, we started doing virtual Sunday school in the church, and I'm a servant in high school, and I feel there has been lukewarmness in general, and I also feel that most of the kids are attached to video gaming now, and they are spending most of their time on it. They are not willing to attend virtual Sunday school. On the other hand, we are not able to visit them because of the COVID situation. And also some of the kids, they totally lost interest and they said we're not coming anymore. My second question is, I had a dream, is to serve through sports or have a sports ministry. Just like we talked about the meeting for the men, we also, I visited
والحلم دوت سيدنا الأنبا يوسف يعني هو سامعني أكيد. حلم أنا بقالي 16 سنة هنا في أمريكا. الحلم إن إحنا ممكن الخدمة بالرياضة
like some people or went to check on some people playing soccer, and I found that there's a lot of kids that I haven't seen in church for a long time that actually go to play. So I wish from His Grace Bishop Youssef if all the churches here in Tennessee could have like either a field or for the kids to play, or like an indoor court. This way it would attract the youth and we would be able to serve them better.
بدل ما بنأجر وكل فترة يبقى ده زي كامل كده قدامنا، أو زي حاجة تجذب الشباب ونقدر نخدمهم بطريقة روحية ونقدم لهم جرعة روحية بالنسبة للشباب وبالنسبة للهاي سكول. شكرا يا سيدي.
كلام كويس خالص واشكرك يا اشرف. طبعا فترة كورونا.
Thank you, Ashraf. Of course, because of COVID recently, the service took like a different form, which is the virtual service on Zoom or like virtual meetings. And it's normal to have some lukewarmness because of this, because this is a change in lifestyle, and this is happening to all of us. But I'm positive that when things get back to normal, that the kids are going to come back to church and we'll have this responsibility towards them again, and they are going to be still attached to the church. They say that there was a similar pandemic in the beginning of the 20th century, and at that time, of course, they didn't have computers or cell phones or anything like that. So you could imagine how harsh it was on the people back then. So we thank God for what we have now. And for what he has given us. Regarding the second question about the sports, of course, we have this here in Egypt. A lot of churches do have sports as part of the church, and this is a global movement, use sports as part of the service. It has been successful in some places, and I don't know what the situation is in your diocese. I think that the idea of using sports is good and helps attract the kids. Like, for example, yesterday here in Egypt we had a big game between Ahli and Zamalek, a soccer game, and it attracted many people. They were very interested in watching this game. So sports do have a good impact, especially if it's used in the right way. Next question by Mary Marcos. How can I keep a balance in the service between I feel I'm a younger servant and I enter the service and there is a lot of older servants there? How can I do some change without bothering the older servants? And also, how can I, as a servant, protect myself from the devil's tricks that maybe he's gonna leave me in the service, but attract me to other things even within the service that are not good.
بعيدة عن ربنا، ازاي ابقى جوه الخدمة واحمي نفسي من الخواطر اللي بره. شكرا يا سيدنا.
شكرا يا ميري.
Thank you, Mary. So if you have any ideas regarding the service, it would be good first to run them by the service coordinator and before we can implement any change. So it's good to discuss these ideas and of course discuss it humbly. So be open to these ideas being implemented or being maybe not, this is not the right time for them, or maybe it needs some tweaking, or maybe we're gonna do it at another time. But don't do it in a way that it would look like like you're serving in a different way, or have a different channel. So these ideas that you have are ultimately for the sake of the God and the service. And so it's good to discuss these ideas with your fellow servants and the ones that are older than you, and ask them what their opinion is about it. They could, for example, tell you that we tried it before and it didn't work, or they may say, yes, this is a great idea. As for being scared of the devil's tricks, as long as you are living in the church and the church is living in you, and you're protecting yourself, never be scared of anything. As long as you're paying attention to yourself and have a good relationship with God, don't be scared. God, who's dwelling in you, and the church that's living in you will protect you from everything, but do not be scared. One of the characteristics of a servant is that he is not afraid, because the servant is working in the field of Christ, invited by Christ, and God's eyes is on him or her from the beginning of the year to the end. So do not be afraid. Thank you. Next question by Karam Salid. I'm a servant in St. Abanoub, Dallas, and I want to ask about what are my limitations in the service. I serve with the sick and the older age, and I feel most of them what they need is compassion. My second question is also regarding the same service, because serving older people, they appreciate it a lot. They pray for us, and they make us feel that we're doing something really great. So how can I not fall into a pride because of
حدودي مع المخدوم يعني ايه اخري معاك يعني انا افضل يعني اللي انا حاسه اقدمه او افضل فيه ولا ليا ليميت اكون معاك فيه. الحاجه الثانيه مرات لما بنخدم ناس كبيره في السن ومرضى طبعا نشكر ربنا بيفضلوا يدعوا لنا كتير قوي 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 وبيحسسونا ان احنا بنعمل حاجه كبيره وحاجه ما بتحصلش. ازاي انا كخادم يعني ما اتغرش من الكلام دوت، عدو الخير ما ياخدنيش في الناحيه دي. شكرا سيدنا وصلي لنا كتير.
شكرا يا اخ كرم. خدمتك طبعا في المرضى دي خدمه حلوه خالص وخدمه جميله.
Thank you, Karam. So of course, it's great to serve the sick. It's a very good service, and there are no limits to any service in which we offer love to someone in need. But if you are doubting anything that you are doing, you can always get the advice of the Father of Confession or the one in charge of the service regarding this matter. Regarding the people's appreciation, of course, when they do that, that's not for me something to make me fall in pride, but to make me more humble. And I should always keep saying during the service, in like praying with myself, saying, thank you, God, for giving me the grace of doing this service. And I should also say thank you, God, and any credit that comes because of the service goes to God, not to me. He's the one that allowed me to be a part of this service. Thank you.
سلام يا سيدنا. شكرا خالص للفرصة دي. أنا بس عندي سؤال واحد.
Next question by Mary Gendi. So yesterday we talked about the calling for the service. So could there be a time when I listen to the call of God to actually stay away from the service for a little bit? So His Holiness is asking, do you mean to take a break And Mary said, like, sometimes people say there is a lot of, devil's resistance, but could it be that the voice of God is for me to just step aside for a little bit to improve in a certain way and then come back to the service? So His Holiness is saying this is probably not the voice of God at all. Because if we start serving, the servant is the one who actually is learning every day. So Mary is saying, but what if the servant is causing problems or causing some people to stumble, or he's not doing what they are supposed to do? No, of course, the one that's causing problems, how can he be serving and causing problems at the same time? But in general, the idea that me as a servant, I would take a break to get better and then come back to the service is not. Most probably, if someone is thinking this way, they will leave the service and never come back. So the right thing to do is to run this, if I have these thoughts, to run them by my father of confession or by the service coordinator, and stay in the service but improve myself within the service. So I remember something that used to happen when someone has thoughts like this. They would give him like a different kind of service. For example, instead of teaching in the Sunday school class, they would be the ones responsible to like collect the donations or pass out the gifts at the end. So he's not doing the main service, but he's still inside the service. But as long as we started serving, we stay in the service, we learn in the service, and we grow in the next question by Manal Zaki. My question is about the debate that was taking place recently because of COVID and communion. Of course, this is something that this is the way we were raised, to take communion this way, and we're sure that the blood of Christ purifies us. So what's your Holiness opinion about this?
واحنا واثقين كل الثقة ان دم المسيح بيطهرنا. فايه رد قداستك على الموضوع ده؟
Of course, we mentioned this over and over recently, that communion in our church is straightforward. We have been living like this for many centuries. And sometimes when we have, for example, a sick person, we give him communion in a different way, which is when someone is sick, we give him the body and the blood together. So of course we are not casting any doubt on the sacrament itself. We are positive that the communion would not transmit any diseases. But you, living in the West, every country has its own guidelines and warnings, and these are some kind of laws, and you have to respect the laws in any place. Here in Egypt, we don't have any of these laws, and we are living our lives as normal as long as everything is under control. So only if there are a number of sick people, we give them communion by this method, and this is what we always do. We go to hospitals or houses or prisons, and this has been going on for a while, that they get communion by this method. Thank you. Next question by Joseph Armani is asking, why don't we have uniformity within the churches here in the US? So we have some churches that are directly following Your Holiness. Some of them are parts of Diocese. And some of them do things a little different. So when our kids travel, for example, to a different state and see something different, they get confused. For example, We heard that some churches pray like liturgy at night, December 24th, which is kind of celebrating Christmas with the West, but we still keep the fast until January 6th. Also, we heard about other churches that have deaconesses and they have special things to wear during the liturgy. Another example is, for example, some churches don't celebrate Halloween at all. Some churches do a celebration for All Saints during that time. These things cause confusion for the kids, and sometimes we don't know how to answer if they go from one state to another and see something like that. We would love to see uniformity between the states. I'm talking about, of course, the U.S. Between like what happens in the churches in different states. Of course, I'm not talking about what is right and what's wrong. Whatever Your Holiness and the Synod would agree with is what we're going to follow. But we would love to see like all the states doing the same thing.
او مين الغلط او مين الافضل او مش من الافضل. طبعا اللي نيافتك تقول عليه والاساقفه والمطارنه والمجمع المقدس امين في كل حاجه، بس اتمنى ان يبقى في توحيد في الحاجات دي على المستوى ككل يعني. واشكر نيافتك جدا سيدنا.
شكرا يا جوزيف.
Thank you, Jose, for this question. Of course, the U.S. is very big and diverse, and all states have different laws and different circumstances, and every bishop in his diocese, he sees what's appropriate for pastoral needs. As long as we are not touching the dogmas or the faith, the way we express, like I was just mentioning, about the story of baptism, that they felt that in very cold situations this could actually kill the baby who is being baptized, and when we asked them to warm the water, they said Jesus was baptized in natural water, not warm water. These differences are due to the different cultures and the different needs of the people. For example, here in Egypt, the year is divided into seasons based on the area of the heaven and the waters and the plants. And we are also, for example, we pray for the Nile River, but in the US there is no Nile. In some other countries, like for example Libya next to us, doesn't have rivers at all. So how should we pray then? So there has to be some kind of difference. So these differences are, as long as they don't have anything to do with the faith or the dogmas, they are acceptable. And even the language that you speak, like you all speak English, but this English is different from one region to the other. But I also want to emphasize that the church in the US has only been there for a little over 50 years, and that's considered a very short time. And notice also that the church grew in an Oriental Eastern culture. Then it moved to the West culture. So of course there is a big difference between the East and the West in the culture, in the way we express things, in the way people think, very different. So the idea of uniformity among the states, I don't think this is the right thing to do. But let me repeat again, as long as we are not touching our dogmas and the traditions that are expressing these dogmas, we are on the right. Thank you, Jose.
سلام يا سيدنا، من قبل الآية دي قداسة البابا.
سؤالي كان بالنسبة
Next question by Nader Moise. So my question is, when Your Holiness spoke about 12 different aspects or dimensions of the servant, sometimes when I see in myself that I'm not able to fulfill some of those aspects in the service, I get a feeling that, this is not for me and I should leave the service, or I don't have what it takes for the service. So His Holiness is answering, of course, neither all of us don't have what it takes for the service, and all of us are not worthy of the service. But when you discover that there is something lacking or there is a weakness, we work on it to make it better. Like, for example, if you see that you're not reading the Bible as much, then you start reading more. Or, for example, if you're not familiar with the hymns, you can make yourself more familiar. But one of the nice sayings, it says, if you want to learn how to pray, get closer to someone who loves to pray. Or if you want to learn the Bible, get closer to someone who loves the Bible. So if I see any weakness in myself, I work on it to make it better. But if I say that I don't have what it takes for the service and I leave the service, that's not right. The consequence of that will not be good, because service is a spiritual struggle, and I improve myself if I go to the service one day, for example, and I at the end of the day I evaluate myself. So this way, the next time the service will be better. It will be more influential. Like Christ said, I came for them to have life and to have a better life. So service is a process of improving to the better, and may God be with you.
سلام يا سيدنا، كان في سؤال في السريع. First of all, نقبل
Next
الآيات.
question by Gaudat
لو في
Wasfi. So he is asking if there is anything we can do regarding bringing the kids of parents that are separated to the church. The best thing we can do is to pray for the parents to reconcile and get back together. But don't speak about any of the parents in a negative way. Just emphasize that dad and mom, they love us, and we are praying for them to get back together.
يعني ده بيبقى الدور بتاعنا في الخدمة دي. شكرا ليك.
George Gerges.
سلام سيدنا، أنا كنت عايز أسأل هل في مشروع لمراجعة
Next question is about is there any plan to make a review of the Synaxarium? Because sometimes, like some days, there are like maybe 5 saints that are their stories are being read, and sometimes it's not very accurate. And I know this has been going on since the time of Pope Shenouda. Is there any plan to fix this? Thank you, Josh. There has been a church rights committee in the Synod from the time of Pope Shenouda to review the Synaxarium, and Bishop Matthäus, the bishop of the Syrian monastery, was actually in charge of this, and they did review it and they printed the book. And we actually through this committee we added 2 days, one for the consecration of St. Mark Cathedral in Egypt and one for the martyrs of Libya. So the Synaxarium is a book where we continuously add to, but it could use another revision, and like you say, some of the things could be more accurate, but this is an ongoing process, and the committee, the rituals committee in the Synod, could actually continue their work in this field.
Lucy Morris, you can unmute. منيرة فرج.
سلام يا سيدنا، أنا منيرة جرجس من تكساس. كان عندي سؤال يا سيدنا. ساعات الخادم بيتحارب بفكر إن هو يسيب
Next
الخدمة
question by
ويروح
Munir
يخدم
Farag.
بره.
There is sometimes we have a fight
بره
as
الروسيا
servants
اللي
that
رايحة العرب كلهم
we
مثلا، يسيبوه دايما
it's better to leave the
وهم
service for the
محتاجين
sake of our
لو
inner
الخدمة
peace.
مثلا
And
نجوح
we
أو
remember the
ضرها
verse
بره
that
الخدمة،
what would
فبيجي
someone gain
عليهم
if
تضارب
he
أفكار أو
gains
تشابك.
everything
فصح يا
and
سيدنا
loses
إن الواحد
himself. Of
يسيب
course, this
الخدمة
happens when
عشان
the atmosphere of the
يريح
service is
ويروح
not
للخدمة ويروح وهو مطمن
comfortable
هناك.
or there is a lot
فهل
of
هيبقى
argument.
ممكن
So, is this right to leave the service for the sake of my inner peace? Because instead of going home after the service and having a blessing, I'm actually going home and I lost my peace. So, is this right? So, the atmosphere in the service, Munia, is an atmosphere of love, and that's the origin. And if there are many arguments, we overcome it by love. But if we all leave the service, who will be left? So if there are issues in the service, we overcome it by love through humbleness. And usually, what causes problems is some form of ego in the service. So the ego of the servant is what causes problems. But if the servant leaves his ego, his service will be very.
نرمين فارس.
نقوب الآية دي سيدنا، وميرسي خالص على الاجتماعات الجميلة قوي دي ووقت قداستك لينا. أنا سؤالي تكملة لكذا سؤال اتقال قبل كده.
Next question by Nermeen Faris. So it's kind of a question that has been asked before or touched on before. So if for the age of especially high school, if the kids don't want to come to church, and even if the Abuna visits them or the servant visits them, they say it's so boring, I don't want to come. What are practical things to do in order to bring those kids to church?
إيه الحلول العملية اللي نقدر نقدمها للولاد دي عشان نجيبهم الكنيسة؟ شكرا.
شكرا ليكي يا نرمين. الصداقة.
Thank you, Nermeen. So friendship, role model, love, and understanding how these kids think. If the servants befriends the kids and establishes this nice friendship between them in Christ, he will be able to bring them. So love is the only way that the world does not have. So the world can offer a lot of fun stuff, a lot of inventions, but it cannot offer love. That's why I'm inviting all of you as servants to be filled with the love of God in order to be able to serve. The servant who depends on his strength or himself or anything that has to do with himself is his service will be very weak. But if you become a channel for the love of Christ, this is the only thing that's missing. Through this, you can bring the kids and they will be attracted to this love of Christ that they see in you. So through the love of Christ, the kids will like to be with the servant, they will like coming to church, and at the same time, that will not stop them from having their social life, or it doesn't stop them from being with their friends, but you as a servant pay more attention to being a source of love to the
اهتم جدا ان انت تبقى مصدر للمحبة اللي تعلمها لأولادك. شكرا.
سلام سيدنا، شكرا على اللقاء الثاني، يا رب يتكرر كتير. احنا كلنا عارفين حب نيافتك للكتب.
Next question by Maureen Thabit. We know that Your Holiness like books and reading, and how can we plant in our kids the love of reading, especially the fathers, because they feel that reading the father's writings is something that's old and it's not important nowadays. Second thing is the resources, because sometimes these books are not available even for the theological students, sometimes we have certain things in Arabic, but it's hard to find them in English, how to make those available. And my third point is that sometimes the resources of Orthodoxy, or to speak to someone about our Orthodox Church, sometimes these resources are not available. How can we make these available?
يعني يعرفوا كتير عن الكنيسة بتاعتنا بتبقى مش متاحة كتير. لما بنيجي نتكلم عن الكنيسة بتاعتنا ما بنلاقيش مصادر نقدر نوصلها للناس اللي بتتكلم إنجليزي أو من بره الكنيسة يعني. شكرا سيد.
شكرا ليكي.
Of course, reading in general is something that's very important. They say read to lead, which means that in order to lead some people, you have to actually be knowledgeable to read. Making some translations of books and writing more books is, of course, a responsibility for you in the West to have this going. But our role as servants in the church is to present how beautiful the church is and how beautiful Orthodoxy is. And sometimes books about patristics or older books, they are first long, and second, they may not be printed in a very presentable way, so they are not appealing to the kids. So maybe if we can take some nice quotes out of these patristic books and present it to the kids in a nice way, it's going to be appealing to them to read it, and through that they are going to understand, have more understanding of the Bible and how the fathers understood and lived the Bible. So you as servants should be like a bridge between the old, the writings of the Father, and this generation that we are serving now. So this is a big responsibility, and it needs concentration, it needs depth, not just writing anything to the kids. Again, this is a big responsibility. Also, translating books is something else. Like, for example, here in Egypt, we talk about like flight of the Holy Family to Egypt. We talk about our monasteries, and we try to translate this to different languages. As an example, the monastery of Saint George, or the nuns, they just published a book in 7 different languages about the path of the Holy Family. They also made a documentary about the journey of the Holy Family, and it was about 46 minutes, like a documentary. It was very made in a very good way. Even the Department of Tourism, they are using it as part of the history of Egypt now. So this is a big responsibility that you have to be aware of course, under the guidance of the bishops and the priests and the older servants.
مدام أمل سلامة.
سلام يا سيدنا، نقبل الأيادي.
أهلا بيك.
أنا بخدم الناس الكبار.
Next question by Amal Salama. My service is with the elderly. I've been serving them for about 21 years, and I have people, older people up to 93 years old. So my question is, how can I have a balance between like in the meetings, for example, being firm and being at the same time cheerful, and also keeping the meeting like quiet.
الاجتماع هايص كده بمحبة كده، هم كلهم بيحبوني وانا بحبهم، والبشاشة وكل حاجة، بس انا محتاجة ازاي اعمل توازن ما بين الحزم وما بين الهدوء، وانا ما عنديش حتة الهدوء.
وهو ال 93 دول عايزين حزم،
عايزين ضحك وهزار وكل حاجة وحضن وطبطبة وكده.
So His Holiness is answering, of course, like 93 years old, they don't need any want to be firm with them, just stay with being cheerful.
93 وتعملي حزم.
طب ترشدني بإيه سيدنا، أعمل إيه يعني؟
بإنك اللي بتعمليه كويس خالص.
شكرا يا سيدنا، شكرا.
شكرا ليك، شكرا.
مايكل نيكولا.
سيدنا نقبل الأيادي، وشكرا لمحبتك وتعبك. ووقتك. هو عندي سؤالين هخليهم
Next question
بسرعة
by
على قد ما
Michael
أقدر.
Nicola.
بالنسبة
Your Holiness read with us part of the epistle to Saint Timothy, and my question is, like, I know that we as an Orthodox Church, as a Coptic Church, have kept the faith for many centuries pure, but at the same time we have an obligation now to evangelize and to get out and speak to other people, and there is some pressure now to protect our kids from atheism or from being non-denominational. So which one is more important? Of course, historically our church was not involved very much in evangelism like some other churches were, but right now we have an obligation to keep the faith, but we also have an obligation to protect our kids, and maybe when they see us evangelizing and bringing other people to the church, that's going to be good for them.
فاحنا لينا دور وفي نفس الوقت لينا دور نحمي اولادنا. فهل يعني معلش يخوني اللفظ، بس هل الهجوم خير وسيله للدفاع؟ هل احنا المفروض على الفرونت التبشيري نتسع اكتر بحيث ان اولادنا لما يشوفوا انه في ناس بان احنا عندنا رساله يقدروا هم من نفسهم يعرفوا؟ ده حاجه نمره واحد. تاني حاجه
Also, my second question is regarding sometimes we as servants may be opposing the family. For example, if the parents are taking their kids to a non-denomination church and we tell them this is wrong, or if maybe one of the parents is smoking, or maybe nowadays sometimes the families are not very stable. So this of course causes problems with the kids. Who would they believe, the church that tells them one thing or the parents that tell them another? So how can we be balanced in not offending the kids, but at the same time telling them the right thing?
ما تكره يعني الولاد كتير بيقعوا في الجاب ده، ان هم طب احنا نصدق بابا وماما اللي احنا بنحبهم واحنا عارفينهم، اللي نصدق الكنيسه. فازاي نبقى متوازنين بحيث ان احنا ما نعملش تضارب في الولاد، ما نعملش اضطراب في الولاد. شكرا متخلص.
شكرا ميشيل. طبعا الخدمة أولا.
So of course service comes first and then evangelism. Just like Christ said, be witnesses to me in Jerusalem, in Judea, and to the ends of the world. So our role in the service is very important. That we have to protect our kids, that we have to teach them the right thing, and they see how these teachings are being taught, are being lived in the church. This is the first thing, and then we go to evangelize. But I'm asking you as servants to put an effort to show the beauty of the church. It's like someone who has a piece of gold, but there is a lot of dust on it. No one is going to see the beauty of it. So put an effort to show the beauty of the church. Like for example, as a servant, of course, if I'm putting an effort to present something beautiful to the kids, they will be attracted. But if I'm repetitive and I'm serving while being bored and I'm not trying to do anything to attract the kids, they will not be attracted to the church and they will be attracted to the world. So this is a question, of course, in English. Just to recap, like, how can we support the clergy who are putting a lot of effort in the service?
فأنت بتقدم الخدمة بأجمل صورة ممكنة.
So we offer the church in a very beautiful way. Sorry, I lost His Holiness.
Okay.
في كمان 3 يا سيدنا، نقدر ناخدهم ولا؟
اتفضل اتفضل.
اتفضل سيدنا بيزل.
Catherine and Joseph Bishara.
So, hi, I'm Joseph Bishara, and I'm in Austin, Texas. And I want to thank you for taking the time. I'm worried about the servants themselves and supporting the servants. I grew up in a small church, and we had church once a year. We were lucky to get that, and we would have to travel long distances in Texas. And then God bless the services of servants in those small places like Abuna Nicholas, who's currently in Lubbock, and Monira, who called in, who's in a small town, and Abuna Antonio Gabriel Motlos, Abuna Yostos, who's now, I'm worried now about a bishop who works very hard, Bishop Youssef. I worry about him, how hard he works. I know of a pope who stays up late on Zoom calls and spends a lot of effort. And I want to support all these bishops and all these priests and all these hard workers in the church who give so much of themselves. I wanted what your thoughts are on how we can support these people who are the body of Christ.
هو سيدنا بيقول ان هو قلقان على الخدام، قلقان على قداستك انك سهران معانا بعد الساعه 12 ونص الليل، قلقان على الاسقفه والكهنه اللي بيسافروا بيتعبوا في خدمه مجهده ومضنيه. فبيسأل ازاي احنا كشعب وخدام نقدر ندعم ونساند ابائنا اللي بيخدمونا بكل محبة وتضحية.
ده سؤال لطيف خالص.
This is a very good question. So first, we can, of course, be mindful of their time. Like, for example, if we call them over the phone, keep it short and focused. Don't put a lot of burden on them with many problems, because some problems we cannot solve, and in all kinds of problems we have to first pray for the problem to be solved. We also pray for them, our servants and our priests. We don't put burdens on their shoulders, but actually we try to help. And we do offer help to them so they can still be able to perform their service. But most important, try to be mindful of their time, because that's the only thing that we cannot renew. Once the day is gone, we cannot bring it back again. This is just some general advice.
Eva Tawadros.
Hello, salam سيدنا. Thank you for taking my question and sorry سهرناك. أنا بس عندي سؤال.
Next question by Eva Tawadros. So the latest announcements by the Catholic Church made like a big impact on, especially with our kids, and some of them do go to the Catholic Church. Of course, I know the church opinion and what the Bible says, but our kids are under a lot of pressure because there are so many other churches that are accepting homosexuals now. How can we deal with this, or how can we talk to them about it?
المثليين دول مترحب بيهم وفتحوا الباب ليهم. فالولاد عندنا بتتعرض لضغط كتير قوي من المدارس ومن الكنايس التانية. فإحنا دورنا إيه كخدام؟ دورنا إيه كبيرنتس؟ وإزاي نقدر إن إحنا نرد على حاجات زي كده؟ شكرا سيدنا.
شكرا يا إيفا.
Thank you, Eva, for your question. So, the latest announcements by the Catholic Church were misunderstood by many, and here in Egypt they were misinterpreted. So, my understanding is that the Pope of Rome he was saying that if, like for example, within a family, they discover that one of them is homosexual, they should give him like enough care and attend to him. But of course, regarding homosexuality, our reference is the Bible, and what the facts that we have in the Bible are what we go by. So what the parents tell their kids is very important. How to teach them the right thing from the Bible. Of course, there is pressure from outside, but what the kids are gonna hear from the parents and from the church is what speaks to them. So this is something that we have to like pay attention to, mention to the kids what we know from the biblical facts, from the history of the church. Although in some times in history we didn't hear much about this, but there were, like for example, Sodom and Gomorrah, and we hear about that in the Bible, like this was present in an evil way. But we have to focus on these biblical facts. We have to teach it to our kids, and we also have to pay attention to being a role model. So this beautiful family setting, dad and mom and brothers and sisters. I did mention one time the word family has 6 letters, and it tells the story of the family, father and mother, I love you. So this is the meaning of the family. The family is the place where I get my satisfaction filled, and at the same time I learn how to love. Also, the family is where I learn the correct principles and how I live my life. Next question by Nisreen Edward. I just forgot to write down number 7 of the principles that Your Holiness mentioned. So the answer by His Holiness was the number 7 was the scissors and the vine.
Oh, hi, Tawadros. I have a question in terms of the services in general, Yani. How do I know if a service is taken away from me? Like, in other words, I'm doing a specific service in the church, and I know I'm doing well in it. How do I know if that service is taken away from me or not by God?
Next question is regarding what if I'm doing service in the church, but I'm not doing it like I'm not doing a good job. How do I know if this is God's calling for me or not? So of course the priests and the service coordinators can help evaluate the service and see if there's anything lacking. They can help him to do better. So next question is regarding visual aids. So of course, like if we do a lesson without visual aids, people are not gonna remember, or the kids are not gonna remember, like, you know, after a month or a year what that lesson was about. But visual aids is very effective, and we are trying here to start having like a bank for visual aids for everyone to, like, you know, click on something and have the visual aids for that lesson online, which would be very helpful. But we have a challenge of the language, of course, and this is still, like, you know, new here. If there's anything in Egypt that has been going on, I know, like, it's more advanced in the service in Egypt. So if there is anything we can use here, that would be great. So His Holiness is saying that there is a lot of good efforts that have been going on here in Egypt, some of them in Alexandria, some in Cairo, and of course not all of them could be something general for everyone to use, but there is a great effort and it's growing. But these are all individual efforts. It will need time to combine these efforts and make, like your suggestion, like something like a bank for everyone to use. Next question is about how can we tell the servants or teach the servants that service is not just something voluntary that we do as part of our time, but then we have like kind of a double life. Like we have our life outside and we have our priorities, but then we have time when we come to church and do the service. So how can we address this point? My second question is regarding the parents that bring their kids to the church, but they don't help the servants, and they rely completely on the church with their kids' spiritual life. So how can we address this as well? One of the important things in the service is to have a servants meeting, and inside the servants meeting we learn about or we have this recognition of that the service is part of our life, not just a part-time. A successful servants meeting would be divided every month. 1 week talking about spiritual topics, another week about biblical topics, third week about parenting or how to deal with the kids, and a fourth week would talk about the church and the life of the church. If we have a meeting like this would raise the awareness of the servant of how to deal with the kids, how to deal with the parents, how to improve the service in the church, and so on. So the presence of a servants meeting and the active participation of the servants in this meeting is one of the most important factors of a successful service.
We don't know how to thank Your Holiness enough. Yani, Your Holiness was so patient with us. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, yani, and Qadastak, and yani, whether in English or in Arabic, if I try to thank Your Holiness in Arabic, I will not be able to. And in English, I cannot. Thank you so much, Sayyidina, for all of your love and your fatherhood. and all the images that you've shown us in the talk. You've shown us much more in answering so much of our questions. There is no more questions. Thank you, Sayyidina, for your love.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Grace. God bless all of you. اللهم اجعلنا مستحقين أن نقول بشكر يا أبانا الذي في السماوات. امضوا بسلام، سلام الرب يكون مع جميعكم.
ومع